Good afternoon, TechNation. Thank you all for participating in today's webinar. We are thrilled with the great turnout with over 165 attendees registered. Just a few notes before we begin. Earlier today, registrants were emailed a Webinar Wednesday workbook. If you did not receive the copy, you can download it in the handout section of your webinar dashboard. Again, all lines will be muted, but you can submit questions by using the questions or chat feature on your dashboard. Today's webinar is eligible for 0.1 CE credits from the ICC. Certificates of attendance are sent to attendees that complete the post-webinar survey at the conclusion of today's webinar. The survey will appear on your computer screen, and certificates will be emailed on or before October 22nd. If you do not receive the survey, you can email us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Don't forget, many of the same speakers from our Webinar Wednesday series are featured at our annual trade shows. Our next show will be next week, MD Expo Las Vegas, the 21st to 23rd of October at Red Rock. A VIP pass for hospital employees, military, and students was provided in today's webinar workbook. You can visit our website for more information at mdexposhow.com. Okay, TechNation would like to thank our sponsor, Universal Medical Resources, Inc. UMRI has nurtured a business philosophy found on offering comprehensive nuclear medicine equipment services at reduced price. UMRI products and services include new and refurbished nuclear imaging systems, quality parts, excellent equipment service, training courses for clinical engineers, camera system moves, technical and clinical support, flexible financing options, and more. For more information, please visit them at www.uni-med.com. Our presenter today is Craig Diener, Senior Product Manager at Universal Medical Resources, Inc. Craig has 22 years of experience in nuclear medicine, which include 19 with an OEM and multiple capacities, including production technician, production management, system procurement, and asset management, and product management. Craig, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, John. Welcome, everyone, to our webinar today on protecting your nuclear investment. Today, we'll be talking about several topics on ways that you can preserve the life of your product for years to come. Some of the topics we'll be talking about include environmental concerns, preventive maintenance, a little bit on daily and weekly quality checks, service contracts and service in general, end of life, end of service, end of support notifications, what to do when hard drive failures occur, and we'll talk a little bit about a product called critical product recovery. So as John mentioned, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put your questions in the queue, and we'll try to get to them at the end of the show. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So when it comes to protecting your nuclear medicine investment, as we've seen in the last several years, there's been a lot of pressure on departments and practices due to lower reimbursement rates. Throughput and uptime are the keys to profitability. However, competition from other modalities, as you know, can limit our throughput. So what can you do otherwise? You might have more control over maximizing your uptime. And as we've seen, more and more facilities are keeping their older equipment in an effort to lower their overhead. In some cases, they're postponing that next capital equipment purchase. As a result, we've seen a lot of nuclear systems in the install base that are approaching or exceeding 20 years. So what are the keys to protecting that investment? Once again, we'll talk about several topics: environmental concerns, preventive maintenance or PMs, quality control, regular service, and then what to do with sudden or unexpected issues. So let's start with environmental concerns. As we know, temperature and humidity fluctuations or extremes can really impact your electronics. If you're located near the sea where there's high levels of salt and humidity in the air, then corrosion can also set in and cause problems. Older circuit boards are particularly vulnerable. Capacitors tend to dry out, and of course semiconductors by nature generate heat. So it's important to keep your electronics cool with proper ventilation and fan to avoid lockups and failure. As you know, fans can't run forever. They do have bearings and things in them that are just not meant to be running 24/7, 365. So it's important to look at those, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Optical grease is the compound that holds your PMTs to the crystal surface of your system. This is sensitive to high temperatures, and over time as well, thinning can occur. This causes image degradation and tuning instability. Some of you may have seen a situation where you see an oily looking deposit dripping on the floor from your detectors. That's what this optical grease is. Dust and other debris can settle into your system. It can clog filters, make your fans work harder, and of course shorten the life of your fans, as well as other mechanical components which can wear out over time. So it's important to have a dedicated, good heating and air conditioning unit, as well as do some regular cleaning to preserve your system and the components for years to come. A little bit on shielding, if we could. If you're about to purchase a new system, or if you're planning on moving your current system, you might want to consider some proper shielding. Things to take into consideration include, if you're a multi-unit department, that other nuclear imaging systems can affect the image quality. They can interfere with each other. So it's important to keep either the distance or shielding in between the systems. In addition to that, keep in mind your injection locations. You don't want an injected patient walking down the hallway to a restroom and interfering with some of the studies that you're doing. Another thing to take in consideration is your hot lab placement. A lot of you may have a small department with just a small room adjacent to your scanning room that's used for a hot lab. It's important to keep your sources contained within the shielding of your hot lab, and always transport your sources in properly shielded containers. Something else to keep in mind is CTs, MRs, X-rays, other systems can interfere with your system. I've seen over the years many systems that were installed and had issues, intermittent issues, that have taken days, even weeks to pinpoint the problem. Turns out it might be a CT across the hall that's firing, or it could be an MR system down the hallway. Any of those things can interfere with your system. Even had one where radio waves were interfering from a local radio tower. So just keep those things in mind when planning your department. Let's talk a little bit about power quality. So look at this first statistic here. More than 3,600 outages in the country in 2014, affecting 14 million people. That's a staggering amount. Now, we don't know how many of those actually affected imaging departments, but if you look at the stats here, you can see power disturbances are prevalent everywhere. Surges, brownouts, unstable power, and noise are extremely harmful without proper protection. Hard shutdowns can corrupt software files and cause permanent damage to the electronics in your system. This leads to disrupted processes, lack of reliability, frustration, broken schedules, downtime, and lost revenue. Keep in mind, the more sophisticated the equipment you have, the more vulnerable it is to damage from power and quality problems. So a power conditioning UPS does more than just provide battery backup power during outages. A power conditioning UPS can absorb spikes using a surge diverter circuitry. This will clip the excess voltage. It can fill in voltage sags with a voltage regulator circuit. This keeps the power between the upper and the lower limits. And it can provide filtering and shunt your high frequency noises to ground. UPSs can ensure better performance and longer life for your entire system, and should be part of any purchase, whether new or reconditioned. Some companies offer a UPS as an option. Here at UMRI, a UPS is not an option. It's part of the purchase of your camera. So a UPS provides time to finish your current scan, remove your patient, and proceed with an orderly shutdown. It should never be used to continually operate your system. There's typically not enough time to do a full scan. A UPS is made to last roughly 30 minutes, give or take a little bit, depending on how much of a load it's carrying. And the size is important. The proper size of the UPS can vary if you have a small camera or a single head camera, typically 2 to 4 kVA. General purpose dual head camera usually requires a 4 to 8 kVA UPS. And then a hybrid system obviously would use something significantly higher. Keep in mind the battery life is important. Typically 3 years under normal usage. Could be less if you're in an area where power outages are common and UPSs kick in. But it's recommended under normal usage that you change your batteries every 2.5 years. Let's talk a little bit about preventive maintenance. Your system's probably working fine now, but that doesn't mean it's going to last forever. Just like buying a car, you don't just put gas in it and drive it forever. You have to schedule time for oil changes, brakes, and regular maintenance. So it's important to schedule this time to avoid future problems. So you should establish a periodic inspection and service and be based on time or volume, like an oil change where it's every 3 months or 3,000 miles. We recommend a semi-annual preventive maintenance. So when you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for a system, extending the life of the system is very important, as you already know. So what does a PM include? What is your service tech doing when he pulls the covers off of your system and you hand it over to him for the day? Well, some of the first things he'll do, he'll probably tune the detector, do a flood correction, and if needed, he'll do a complete recalibration of the detectors and probably burn new corrections. He'll also clean and re-grease all of the mechanical components. Keep in mind, dust can settle onto the grease and all of the components inside the system and tends to dry out or cake up, and this leads to lubrication failure. Old grease has to be removed and a fresh layer of grease must be applied. All you need is just a few mils to ensure smooth operation. Fans are the most important part of your system and should always be inspected and replaced as needed. So in addition to the normal PM checks, your FSE should perform some basic safety checks as well. Patient tables are a very critical component of your system. Whether your patient pallet is made of aluminum or composite material, the constant stress of loading and unloading heavy patients can cause fractures in your table. Each model has different stress points that need to be checked periodically. Safety mechanisms are also important. In addition to testing the e-stop and collision sensors during the PM, it's advisable for the technologist to check them on a regular basis to avoid a patient fatality. Patient safety should never be compromised, and a few minutes of prevention can greatly reduce your liability.
Just wanted to quickly remind everyone that you can ask questions by using the chat feature on the right-hand side of the dashboard. We actually had a great question come in if you have a quick time to answer it.
Okay.
What types of parts typically wear out?
Typically on a nuclear camera, PMTs are a common failure component, as well as power supplies. The circuit boards, depending on the system, they all have their own little boards that tend to wear over time. And then as far as mechanical components go, typically motors and any moving part tends to break down the most.
Okay, thanks. I got another quick question. We don't have a UPS on our camera. How do we size the UPS for those cameras?
I would suggest that you contact your service provider, and they can help you choose the right size UPS for your system.
Okay, great. I'm sorry to interrupt. You can go ahead and continue. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about daily and weekly quality checks. Most of you already have a program in place, but you might ask, what can you do to ensure your system runs smoothly and performs for many years? And like I said, establishing a daily, weekly quality routine can really be helpful. If you're compliant with ACR and eye canal standards, you should be fine. Again, just use your cobalt sheet source to acquire your daily floods, verify that your cobalt peaks are right on, and do a flood image on each detector, as well as bar images. And then visually inspect your floods and compare them to the previous day or even the previous week. If there's a variance in numbers, uniformity numbers, if there's a variance in the visual effects of the image, or if your bars are crooked or lack definition, it would be a good time to call your service rep. And I might add that your daily QC results are the barometer of your camera's performance. They also provide your service tech a valuable historical record that can be useful when he's diagnosing imaging problems. Your service provider should customize a plan that fits your budget and your needs. So we'll talk a little bit about the different service plans that are available. Most of you know what a full service contract is. A full service maintenance contract covers everything in the system, including travel expenses and, of course, labor and parts. It will probably exclude crystal breakage and sometimes crystal hydration. If you have a question about that, I would suggest you look at your contract. Another one is a co-op first pass. For sites that have an in-house biomed department, a co-op first pass is offered at a reasonably lower cost. Biomed tech in-house will provide the first pass service and may receive some phone support from the provider as well in an effort to save time from dispatching an FSE to the site. This saves money for you as well as your provider. Preventive maintenance only, or as we call it, a PM only. It offers predetermined number of PMs throughout the year. Here at UMRI, we provide 2 per year. All other service is on a time and billable material basis. Capped camera coverage is another alternative. We call that a PM Plus here at UMRI. And a PM Plus provides a specific number of PMs. As I said, we provide 2. Service is provided on a billable basis, but is capped at a predetermined amount as agreed to in the contract. And then there's also a time and materials preferred system where service is billable, and this would include labor, parts, travel, and everything else. But I might add, do not neglect your PMs if you are on a billable plan. The PMs are very important. So with the many choices available, there's a service solution for every system, every budget, and every comfort level. If you've been in the nuclear medicine business for any length of time, you've probably encountered an EOL notification, or EOS in some cases, depends on the OEM and their terminology. So if you've received one of these letters, what would you do? Do you have funding for a new camera? Perhaps not. So what else is there to do? Well, there's no need to panic. You just need to start planning now for the future. Ask questions and do a little research. Find out what the OEM's obligations are. In most cases, they must provide safety support for the life of the product. But in some cases, they may only be able to offer a best effort solution. So what would you do then? Well, you can search out independent service organizations, or ISOs, that have expertise in the model of camera that you have. An ISO is a third-party provider of cameras, service, parts, and support. They often purchase used cameras to provide parts and service expertise on non-current products like yours. There's a large network of ISOs who provide legacy product support. It's important that you take the time to find a company that you can trust. At UMRI, we have several cameras set up by the major OEMs dedicated for parts testing, biomed training, and phone support as well. If you need training, for example, ISOs can offer legacy product training for your staff, whether it's biomed training or maybe a refresher on some of the clinical applications. But remember, end of support does not mean end of life for your product. In the event of a hard drive crash, your system could be down for a pretty length of time. So I'm sure that most of you have some type of patient data backup, whether it's a PAC system, maybe CDs and DVDs, or maybe even a printer. But either way, you should follow HIPAA regulations and high-tech guidelines for patient data storage. But what about the rest of the system? What about the loss of system-specific data? How long would it take you to locate your software disks, load all of your software, and recreate your custom settings and re-network your system? So Universal has a product called Critical Product Recovery, or CPR as we called it. CPR is a software application that backs up camera-specific data. It does not back up patient data or the patient database in your system, only the system-specific data. This will reduce your downtime and equate to more revenue for your department. It provides restoration of the system quickly, typically 30 minutes per hard drive instead of days. So let me repeat the question for you. How long would it take you to locate your software disks, load all of your software, configure the settings listed on this slide, re-network the system, and worse yet, if you don't have your corrections backed up for your camera, recalibrate and create new correction tables? Something to keep in mind. It'd probably take you and your service tech days to get all this accomplished. This equates to downtime, lost revenue, and rescheduling of patients, all due to a hard drive crash that could only be a minor setback. CPR is currently available on most Pegasus-based ADAC systems. Other popular OEM camera models will be available in the future. So ask yourself, how much is it worth to minimize the risk of a hard drive failure? So in conclusion, purchasing a spec system is the most important investment your department will make. So it's important that you implement a program that includes proper planning, regular maintenance, and a trustworthy service partner to keep your system running for 5, 10, 15, or more years. So thank you very much for your time. If we have any questions, we'll be glad to try to answer as many as we can.
Thank you very much. Great informative webinar. We do have a bunch of questions here. We're going to go ahead and start out. The first one is, my camera is 25 years old and my independent service provider can no longer find parts. What are my options?
Well, it depends on the type of camera you have. And if you have a camera that was very popular, has a very high install base, there should be many alternatives for you to find a service provider and parts for your system to keep it running for years to come. If, however, the camera that you have does not have a large install base, then it may be time to start thinking about a new camera or a reconditioned camera.
Okay, next question. I have an old ADAC camera. Can I get more information on the CPR product?
Yes, if you could, please leave your information with the team here at TechNation, and we will be glad to get back with you on that.
Okay, next question. In general, what is the parts availability for 10-plus-year-old systems?
Once again, depending on the type of camera that you have, but you know, typically speaking, there should be plenty of parts available on the third-party market, and again, that varies by model.
All right, next one. Are there any early warning signs of mechanical failure?
Yeah, some of the things you should look out for. Typically, there would be audible noises, whether it's a loud hum, a grinding noise as the system is moving, some clunks that you might hear might be ever so slight, but those are all early warning signs to have your service tech investigate for you. As far as visual signs, typically metal shavings, or maybe something is hot to the touch. If you put your hand on it, it seems hotter than normal. I would suggest have your service tech look at those and see if there's any issues.
Okay. What equipment and supplies do I need to do my own daily maintenance?
Well, typically you should have a bar phantom, of course your cobalt sheet source, and of course Tech99. In most hot labs you will have that. That should be the main thing. That should cover most of it.
Next one. Can most common problems be solved over the phone, or do I need to have a tech support person come to my facility?
That's a good question. It depends on how major and how minor the problem might be. It's always good to start with a phone call, and if it can be phone fixed, if it's something that maybe a phone support person can guide you through, then that would save you a service call. If not, however, and if it requires a service call, then that would be the alternative. But the phone support is probably the best place to start.
Okay, next one. Can you run through the typical preventive maintenance activities once again?
Okay. Let me just grab my slides once again, if I could. So once again, we talked about image quality checks. And again, we talk about detector tuning, flood correction tables, and then potentially recalibration and reburning new correction tables on the detector. Of course, greasing and lubrication are very important. And then fan inspection and replacement. And then, as I mentioned on the following slide, were some safety checks, including stress cracks in the patient table, as well as checking your safety mechanisms like e-stops and collisions. Those are the main ones. Now, there might be other things as well, depending on the type of camera that you have. Okay, if there are no more further questions, that's going to conclude the webinar today. We'd like to thank Craig again for being our speaker and our today's sponsor, UMRI. Please visit their website, uni-med.com, to learn more about their products and services. And attendees, remember, to obtain your certificate of attendance, you must complete the post-webinar survey at the conclusion of today's presentation, and the survey will appear shortly on your computer screen. If you do not receive it, please email us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Please visit onetechnation.com/webinars to register for our next webinar Wednesday. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.